the air we breathe. In the decade after the 1990 Clean Air Act, amendments were signed into law by the first President Bush. And then our unemployment rate declined, our economy grew, and we reduced acid rain-forming gases by more than 30%. Mr. Speaker, do you have any more time to use?
Yeah, I will yield 30 additional seconds to the gentleman.
Mr. Speaker, the cost of meeting the emission reductions was actually 75% less than what EPA had originally predicted and even farther below what opponents had claimed. In the case of the rule for boilers and solid waste incinerators, EPA issued proposed standards in April of this year, 11 years after the statutory deadline. They listened to affected businesses. They cut compliance costs by a half and issued a modified final rule in February. Mr. Speaker, EPA is doing everything the law requires and that the public health requires. This body ought to do the same and defeat this bill. Thank you.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
This time I would like to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished lady from Washington State, Ms. McMorris Rogers, a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee.
I thank the
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the chairman for yielding, and I appreciate his leadership on this important issue. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 2250, the EPA Regulatory Relief Act of 2011. At a time when our nation's economy continues to struggle and employment remains at a record high, Congress should focus on legislation that will keep and create jobs in America, not suffocate them or send them overseas. As an original co-sponsor of this legislation, I know it will do just that. Last week I was home in eastern Washington on an energy and jobs tour, and I met with citizens and small businesses and job creators. And whether I was up in Colville or in Spokane, the message was clear. The federal government is making it harder to manufacture, harder to produce, harder to innovate anything in America. The anxiety and the uncertainty caused by the federal government's record regulatory overreach is destroying any chance of economic recovery. Like the ozone standard, the simple truth is the new, stricter Boiler MAC regulations will have a disastrous effect on our economy. The EPA itself says that these rules will cost thousands of jobs. Independent studies say up to 224,000 jobs could be lost. And one example is in eastern Washington. The Pondering Newsprint will be forced to spend $8 million on mandatory upgrades. That's $8 million that cannot be spent on retaining and creating jobs. The EPA Regulatory Relief Act requires the EPA to set realistic, achievable, fact-based standards that will not destroy jobs while still protecting the environment. I urge my colleagues to support this pragmatic, common-sense solution. And I thank the gentleman for yielding and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Kentucky reserves his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yes, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison.
The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 3 minutes.
Let me thank the gentleman from Massachusetts, and also thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, a number of very passionate and well-informed speakers have come before this body today to urge a no vote based on facts, based on research, and all this is extremely important, and I'm so glad they did it. But, Mr. Speaker, for the people watching this debate today, they need to know one thing, and that is that this legislation, bought and paid for by industry, so that people can try to save money at the expense of people's health and their lives, and this is exactly what's going on here today. What's going on here today is that industry interests back candidates who'd come here today and to offer legislation that would allow the cement industry, the coal-fired power industry, the boiler industry users to just dump mercury and other junk into the air that makes you sick. And as we're talking about jobs, what about a jobs bill that could put Americans to work, as opposed to just saying we're just going to get rid of all the regulations in America. No more. What if we just got rid of all the regulations in America? We would be sicker, we would die sooner, we would be much less of a country. What if we just said that we're going to put the health of Americans up front? We're going to actually introduce a jobs bill like the American Jobs Act. What if we did those things? America would be back on track. But maybe some of these big industrial polluters would be a little sadder. I say today, Mr. Speaker, that this Congress should reject the attack on Americans' health. In the last 3 weeks, we have seen industry polluters from the industry that uses these boilers, the cement industry, and coal-fired power plant industry be able to just run amok on the people's health. And we have yet to see a single jobs bill in the course of 250-plus days as this majority has been in the hands of the Republicans. This is a national disgrace. The American people said they wanted jobs. They haven't got them. The American people say they want to be well and healthy. They are seeing assaults on that. And this is something that the American people need to bring their attention to, Mr. Speaker. And I hope that people are paying attention to this debate today because it is crystal clear whose side the majority is on. Industry polluters, not the American people. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I may say to the gentleman from Minnesota, I don't know exactly what he's talking about when he says bought and paid for by industry. I might say that this legislation is being offered because hospitals, schools, industry, a wide range of interests have come to us and asked for help. And the insinuation that we were bought and paid for by industry is a little bit of an affront to this institution. This time I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Olson, a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, for 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the chairman of the subcommittee. Mr. Speaker, President Obama's regulatory agenda, being led by the EPA, is going to kill the American pulp and paper industry. My father spent his entire career in the pulp and paper industry, so I know firsthand that if the misguided Boiler and MACT rules are allowed to be implemented, 36 mills across this country will close and more than 80,000 jobs will be lost. These jobs will be lost because of the EPA's failure to understand the basics of how this industry works. The industry does not oppose reasonable regulations. They are just asking to have regulation based on sound science and that can be achieved with technology that is currently available here in the real world. Mr. Speaker, we need to stop exporting American manufacturing jobs. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 2250, the EPA Regulatory Relief Act of 2011, to create an immediate positive impact on American jobs and the recovery of our economy. I thank the chair and yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Kentucky reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yes, I yield myself 1 minute at this time. You know, what we have here today is just one more episode in what is a 1-year Republican control of the Congress, which has seen a litany of industries that no longer want to make the air cleaner, no longer want to make the water safer to drink, come out here on the House floor with Republican leadership in order to repeal the laws, to water down the laws, to protect children from mercury, to protect children from contracting asthma. That's what this is all about. EPA used to stand for the Environmental Protection Agency. Now it stands for every polluter's ally out here. They all come out here and they want to ensure that the laws are watered down. And that's what we're fighting. That's what Democrats are fighting here. We're fighting to ensure that the water stays clean, that the air stays safe to breathe. And the boiler industry is saying, no, there's not enough mercury that gets sent up into the air. There's not enough mercury that goes into the lives of children in our country, and we're going to fight that. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Yes, I would like to remind the gentleman from Massachusetts that there are a large number of Democrats on this legislation. At this time, I'd like to yield to the gentleman from California, Mr. Herger, 2 minutes.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2250, which will protect American jobs from the EPA's unnecessary and economically destructive Boiler MAC regulations. At this time of high unemployment and economic hardship, the EPA wants to require costly retrofitting of boilers at small businesses, energy plants, schools, and churches in Northern California and congressional district I represent and across the nation. This regulation is another example of the Obama administration standing in the way of job growth. The Department of Commerce estimates that the 276 pages of federal regulation could eliminate as many as 60,000 U.S. jobs nationwide. The EPA's own fact sheet says that implementing these rules will cost more than $5 billion. In August of 2010, the Small Business Administration explicitly warned the EPA that these regulations were too extreme and would harm small businesses. Unfortunately, the EPA did not heed this warning. In addition, the boiler regulation will impose substantial and unnecessary costs for Americans to use biomass energy, an essential part of job growth in the Northern California district I represent. Biomass is a clean and renewable energy source that could help increase our energy supplies and manage our overgrown and fire-prone forests while creating much-needed jobs. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation to protect jobs and ensure that this costly regulation does not go into effect. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Kentucky reserves his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts recognized.
Again, I would ask the Chair if we could review again how much time is remaining.
Gentleman from Massachusetts has 1 3/4 minutes.
And how much time does the majority have?
The gentleman from Kentucky has 9 minutes.
9 minutes. So if the gentleman from Kentucky would not mind, we will reserve until the gentleman has.
This time I would like to
reduced his
recognize
time.
the gentleman from Tennessee, Dr. Rowe, for 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the Chairman for yielding. I rise today in support of this legislation. We cannot afford to enforce the proposed MAC regulations, especially when unemployment exceeds 9%. These new burdensome regulations would result in the loss of over 200,000 jobs, over 8,400 of which are in Tennessee. When will this administration learn that further burdening the job creators does not create jobs? This is just another example of failed leadership, and it is our duty to the American people to ensure the EPA does not continue down the same path that will only lead to job loss. The new rules affect approximately 200,000 boilers. These boilers burn natural gas, fuel oil, coal, biomass, refinery gas, or other gas to produce steam, which is used to generate electricity or to provide heat for factories or other industrial or institutional facilities or schools. This will especially affect the economic outlook in the agricultural community. Agriculture accounts for more than 950,000 jobs, both on and off the farm, a large portion of the American economy. In Tennessee, 13.8% of the workforce is employed in agriculture, and these jobs we cannot afford to lose to government overreach. If forced to replace current coal-fired boilers with natural gas boilers at this time, there's no doubt that the cornerstone of our economy would suffer. Or consider Eastman Chemical, a manufacturing company headquartered in my district. Eastman generates $6.9 billion in revenue and employs over 11,000 Tennesseans. There is no doubt these new regulations would negatively impact their business, the effects of which they estimate for their company alone would be in the tens of millions of dollars. In fact, Boiler MAC regulations could cost the manufacturing sector over $14 billion in capital plus billions more in annual operating costs. And complying with the incinerator standards could cost even billions more. As the EPA has acknowledged, the rules were finalized with serious flaws because the EPA was forced to meet a strict court-ordered deadline. This common-sense legislation does not repeal the rules. It simply allows time to come up with a plan to support clean air efforts without more burdensome regulation on job creators. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts recognized.
Yes. I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from. May I instead just reserve the balance?
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves his time. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
This time I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Louisiana, a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Scalise.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman from Kentucky for yielding and really want to thank him for bringing this jobs bill to the House floor. This legislation, this EPA regulatory reform bill, is critical to saving tens of thousands, over 100,000 jobs in America that are at risk if the EPA is able to get away with yet another radical regulation they're trying to implement. You know, when I go throughout southeast Louisiana and talk to job creators, talk to our small business owners, the people that are struggling in this tough economy, but they still want to try to create jobs, and I ask them, I say, what are the things that are holding you back from creating jobs, from having your business grow so that more people can have great opportunities to live the American dream? And there is a consistent theme that they all say, and that is that it's the regulations coming out of Washington, D.C., coming out of the Obama administration that are the prime reason that is holding them back from creating good jobs in this country. You know, and of course we've seen it in southeast Louisiana. And we've got tough times, but you go all throughout the country and you see the same thing. And you just look at the numbers from outside groups that have actually tried to figure out just how devastating the impact would be of just this boiler regulation if it were to go into effect by the EPA. Over 1,500 boilers across this country are at risk. And you're talking about over 230,000 jobs. And just look at some of the states. I mean, the state of North Carolina, the state of Indiana, the state of Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, each of those states will lose over 10,000 jobs if this radical EPA regulation goes into effect. You know, the president's running around the country saying, pass this bill. He was saying pass the bill before he even filed the bill. And yet here's an actual bill on the floor of the House of Representatives that will save over 230,000 jobs that will be lost. And yet the president wants to ram through this radical regulation anyway, in spite of the fact that all those jobs will be lost. I think the American people understand what's going on. They're saying sanity needs to be reinvoked in Washington in this administration. Stop running jobs out of the country. Let's put common sense reforms in place. This bipartisan legislation does that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Kentucky reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yes, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for his leadership. And I would like to quote Bruce Bartlett, who was the economics advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and President George H.W. Bush. He said this in an article in the New York Times this week, in quotes, on August 29th, the House Majority Leader, Eric Cantor of Virginia, sent a memorandum to members of the House Republican Conference telling them to make the repeal of job-destroying regulations the key point in the Republican jobs agenda. But evidence supporting Mr. Cantor's contention that deregulation would increase unemployment is very weak.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Yes, may I ask how much time we have remaining?
The gentleman from Kentucky has 4 minutes. The gentleman from Massachusetts has 1¼ minutes.
At this time, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Duffy.
The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 2 minutes.
And I appreciate the gentleman from Kentucky yielding. I come from central and northern Wisconsin, where we have a large forest products industry. We make a lot of paper in Wisconsin. And if you look at these rules, they are going to have a significant impact on Wisconsin paper. Real jobs that support our families. Dom Tower Industries, 1,400 jobs. Flambeau River Paper, 300 jobs. New Page, 3,200 jobs. Wausau Paper, 1,600 jobs. And so we look at these regulations that are going to increase the standards on our boilers. And if you increase those standards, causing our companies to spend millions of more dollars to meet those standards, what's going to happen? You are going to ship Wisconsin paper to China and Brazil. And what happens there? They don't have the same standards that we have. And in the end, what's going to happen is we're going to outsource Wisconsin jobs, and our paper is going to be made with reduced standards. And I think in the end, those who care about our environment, who care about standards to make sure we have clean water and clean air, if you look over to China, they don't have those same standards. But in the end, we breathe the same air and drink the same water. So let's make sure we have efficient standards that can keep American industry and Wisconsin paper in business, doesn't ship these jobs overseas, but also has, with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves his time.
He reserves the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, we do not have any other speakers. I believe that we have the right to close, so I would let the gentleman from Massachusetts go, and then I'd like to close, if that's okay.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 1¼ minutes.
I yield myself the remainder of our time. The Republicans have yet to bring a job creation bill out here on the House floor in the 10 months they have controlled the Congress. Instead, what they're doing is responding to industries who do not want to make the air cleaner, who do not want to make the water safer for the children of our country to drink and to breathe. And instead, they make the case that making the environment cleaner kills jobs, when we know that all evidence says it creates more jobs because it spurs innovation in new technologies that create jobs that make our economy stronger. Instead, they argue that what the country needs is more mercury, more arsenic, more cadmium, more asthmas, more mercury poisonings, more carcinogens that harm the health of our country. So not only do they not help the health of our economy by bringing out a jobs bill, and instead they bring out bills that hurt the health of the American people, where they live in their families. That's what their agenda has been all about since the day they took over in January. And that's the agenda that we're voting on here today. Vote no.
The gentleman's time's expired.
Republican health killing
gentleman
bill.
from Kentucky is recognized.
Well, in closing, I would urge every member of this body to support 2250. We believe that it is genuinely a balanced approach. EPA even was trying to convince the court that their rule was a good rule, the old rule. And to just give you a very concrete example of some of the practical impacts of what's going on here, EPA went to the court last December when it asked for time to fix the Boiler-Mac rules, which the court denied it, and pointed out that the investments required by industry are irreversible. And an example of that, representatives of Notre Dame University came to our hearing. And in order to comply with the Boiler-Mac rules issued in 2004, which were invalidated by the court, the University of Notre Dame spent $20 million. And now they're not in compliance with the new rule. So they're going to have to come forth with an additional millions of dollars. So that's not happening only at the University of Notre Dame. That's happening at just about every university around the country, hospitals around the country, small businesses around the country, small utilities around the country. So if we don't take some action, there are going to be a lot many fewer jobs in the economy than there are today, because testimony after testimony after testimony has indicated that entities cannot meet these new rules, are going to have to close down and lose jobs. So one way that we can help the administration create jobs is to prevent the loss of jobs. And if this administration would be assert more common sense in their rules, we could remove some of the uncertainty to help us create more jobs in America. So I would urge every member to support 2250. It's a balanced approach, protects health, protects industry, and provides a more common sense approach to this significant problem. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for general debate has expired. Does the gentleman from Kentucky have a motion?
Yes, I move that the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 2250, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 2250 and has come to no resolution thereon. Pursuant to House Resolution 419 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House in the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 2681. Will the gentleman from California, Mr. Denham, kindly take the chair?
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for the further consideration of H.R. 2681, which the clerk will report by title.
A bill to provide additional time for the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency to issue achievable standards for cement manufacturing facilities and for other purposes.
When the Committee of the Whole rose on Wednesday, October 5, 2011, a request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 3, printed in the Congressional Record by the gentlewoman from Maryland, Ms. Edwards, had been postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in the Congressional Record, which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment Number 23 by Mr. Cohen of Tennessee. Amendment Number 5 by Mr. Keating of Massachusetts. Amendment Number 3 by Ms. Edwards of Maryland. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes of minimum time for any electronic vote after the first vote in the series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 23, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 23, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Cohen of Tennessee.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote. Did I get one?
The House spent most of yesterday debating a bill that would delay Environmental Protection Agency regulation of air emissions from cement plants. They voted on a dozen or so amendments, mainly Democratic amendments trying to change the bill, and postponed votes on 3 amendments. Those 3 will get votes here. They spent the first hour this morning debating a similar bill, one that deals with EPA regulations and rules dealing with industrial boilers and incinerators. More work on that bill ahead, but as we mentioned, 3 amendment votes and then motion to recommit and final passage. This first amendment is by Steve Cohen of Tennessee. This would require the EPA to consider the potential reduction in the number of respiratory illness-related work absences when issuing new regulations for cement kilns. It's a 15-minute vote. The 2 remaining amendments will get 2-minute votes. We spoke to a Capitol Hill reporter about these 2 EPA regulation bills. Amy Harder covers energy and environment issues for National Journal. Why are House Republicans bringing up 2 bills this week aimed at rolling back EPA rules and regulations on hazardous emissions?
First, thanks for having me. And these two bills are just one piece of the House Republicans' larger battle fighting President Obama's environmental agenda. These two in particular address manufacturing sectors, and those are really salient in the jobs conversation. And as Obama travels the country trying to sell his jobs plan to the country and also to members of Congress, the Republicans are trying to point out that these regulations actually kill jobs.
Well, they've also said that these bills would create jobs and spur the economy. What examples have they given of that?
Right. They do say that some in the administration and supporters of these regulations say that when these companies are going to have to install new technology, that will require more workers to do that. And there's certainly some truth to that. But the Republicans do also have a point that some factories may have to either close down or retool the way their factories operate, and that could lead to job losses. You've already seen some in the electric power sector over some of EPA's larger rules that address the coal-fired power plant sector.
On these two particular bills, are Democrats mainly opposed, and what's their main argument against the bills?
These two bills do have bipartisan support among some of the more conservative Democrats, but these two bills, like most of the bills the Republicans have brought up in the House aimed at curtailing EPA, are mostly supported mainly by Republicans, but there are some Democrats. There's more bipartisan support for rolling back EPA in the House than in the Senate.
What about folks from the Environmental Protection Agency? Have they commented on the impact of blocking these rules?
They have, and they say that their biggest argument is what it would do to public health. The rules save thousands and thousands of lives. One rule that the agency finalized in July that would cut down on coal-fired power plant pollution would save up to 34,000 lives. And the numbers, while smaller for these other similarly smaller regulations for cement factories and industrial boilers, would also save thousands of lives, and that's what the administration also stresses. And it also says that in addition to the public health benefits, companies and industries would net save money by installing more efficient technology.
What about the industry? You mentioned the cement industry and also the industrial boilers. Have representatives from those industries weighed in?
They have. In fact, there's a group of cement executives up on the Hill this week talking to their members, talking to members who represent their districts both in the House and Senate, trying to convey to them the effect that this will have on their industry. And one prominent focus in both of these executive conversations and on the discussion and debate on the floor right now is that if EPA imposes these regulations, then these companies are going to do their jobs overseas. And that has been always an argument in this debate, but it's gained new saliency these last couple of days as the Senate takes up a Chinese currency bill and other things where China has come up in conversation. So in addition to the sheer job losses here, people are talking about the concern of these operations going overseas where the environmental regulations are not as stringent.
Well, assuming House passage with Republican support, what do these bills look like heading into the Senate? Any chance they'll be taken up there?
No, I don't think there will be. Senate Majority Harry Reid has not indicated he will bring these bills, will offer floor time for these bills at all. And in addition to that, President Obama has issued what's called a statement of administrative policy, which basically says that the White House, should these two bills that are expected to pass the House, should they reach his desk, that his senior advisors would recommend a veto. So while these bills will never become law, it does highlight a huge ongoing political and policy debate here in Washington over regulation of government and what role EPA has in ensuring the economy stays afloat.
An update from Amy Harder, and you can read her work at nationaljournal.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
And the House is finishing up work on that cement emissions bill. 3 amendments here. This first one is 15 minutes. This first vote is 15 minutes. 2 more amendments after that will get 2-minute votes. Then motion to recommit and final passage. And the House will continue debate on the bill dealing with industrial boilers and incinerators. Well, during this 15-minute vote, we're going to take you next to the Senate Banking Committee. Secretary Timothy Geithner, Treasury Secretary, in the first of 2 appearances today on Capitol Hill, is saying that the European debt crisis could cause significant damage to the U.S. economy. We'll take you live now over to the Senate Banking Committee and show you what we can while this first vote continues.
So we are trying to do, of course, we want to do the best we can to look at emerging risks, but we are quite humble in our capacity, as anyone would be looking at the history of financial crises, and we want to have a system that recognizes the basic limits on the capacity to anticipate and preempt.
But you also want to do no harm, too, don't you? And that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, there is a risk. You know, I think that if you look at the U.S. economy today, I'd say the biggest risk we face is institutions not taking enough risk, not taking too much risk at the moment. That's a natural aftermath of crises when people are still scarred by the trauma of the crises. But I agree, you want to make sure that people are willing to take risk. You don't want to lose that capacity.
Mr. Secretary, Chairman Johnson got into this some, but I'll ask you again. What are the top 2 or 3 potential emerging threats, as you see it, to the financial stability of the United States? I know debt is one.
Well, the list I would say is you have to start with the European crisis because Europe's big and consequential.
That's right on us now.
And slower growth globally matters because with growth now in the United States somewhere in the 2% range, it's just not strong enough. And we're more vulnerable with growth this week to other things happening that we could anticipate that could bring it weaker. I would focus overwhelmingly on those 2 things. But you are absolutely right that if the United States does not put in place a framework to reduce our long-term deficits over time, that too in the future, it will not happen soon, but that too in the future could reduce growth and hurt the financial strength of the United States.
So basically, the failure to stabilize the federal government's debt burden, if we don't get on the right trajectory in the next few years, could represent a threat to the financial stability of our whole country, could it?
It could if Congress, and I don't think Congress would do this, if Congress sits here and
if we didn't do our job.
If you didn't do anything, don't do your job, then at some point
if we rock
hurt
along
us.
like we're doing now with huge deficits, piling up debt after debt.
I'd be a little more optimistic in the sense that what Congress did in August, even though it was a bit messy, was a pretty good down payment on fiscal reform, but they only got, they only did about a quarter of the problem. And so we had about 3/4 of that problem left to define. That's why the supercommittee is so important.
If I could for a minute just get into the derivatives area. One of the unfortunate side effects, I believe, of Dodd-Frank's derivatives clearing mandate is that market participants could possibly stop doing their own credit analysis because clearinghouses will take on all of the credit risk. Instead of hundreds of analysts that we have today trying to analyze the credit risk, only a few clearinghouses, as I understand it, would be monitoring credit risk. Does this create any systemic risk, or could it, by concentrating so much credit risk in so few clearinghouses? And are clearinghouses, are they too big to fail? We'd hope they would never fail. And would the administration bail out clearinghouses? We've talked about this before, but this could be an important part. We hope we never go down this road.
Senator, you're right that clearinghouses don't eliminate risk, and you're right that they do centralize and concentrate risk for products that are being cleared, but they provide a lot of offsetting benefits, and we think on balance the system will be more stable if you see the standardized products move into exchanges. We've had the experience with a market that was primarily bilateral, and it was a very messy, damaging experience because in the world where it's all bilateral, all the risk is off clearinghouse things, not all of it, but a substantial part of it. Then we found, and you saw this, firms did not really know what their exposure is. And the virtue of moving the standardized stuff to clearinghouses is it's much more simple to understand what your exposure is and how protected you are against that. So we think on balance, if you get the safeguards right, the system is more stable with central clearing.
Mr. Secretary, my time's limited here. Has the Council thought about or discussed whether Operation Twist or other monetary policy actions could create systemic risk?
That's an excellent question, and we have not in the Council talked about the implications of monetary policy judgments for the financial system, and partly just out of deference to protect the independence of the Fed. But to say it a little bit more carefully, as you saw in the report, the Council members did make the sensible observation that one thing you want to make sure banks do is not just be careful managing their credit risk, but their interest rate risk over time. And, you know, we're in a really extraordinary period with rates where they are today, and it's very important that over time, this is not the biggest risk we face right now, that banks are careful to look at those risks too.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shelby. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, let me follow up on one of the, I think, very thoughtful insights that Senator Shelby raised in his opening statement and reiterated, and that is part of the FSOC's mission is to understand systemic risk, to try to anticipate growing risk. It seems to me, from my recollection, that the operational agency most capable of doing it is the Office of Financial Research. If you have an apolitical, analytical organization that are thinking carefully along with their colleagues in academia and on the financial sector, that you'll have a much better chance of doing this. And I would, again, urge you, and you've been doing, I think, a yeoman's work to try to get a nominee up here, to do that soon.
Coming, and you know, we've talked about this, and I'm glad that you remind us of the importance of this office. You cannot effectively oversee a financial system without much better information than we had access to before the crisis about where risk is and where it shapes. And one of the key roles of this office is to make sure there's better data available not just to supervisors, but to the markets as a whole, so markets can make better judgments about where risk is. And, of course, that won't happen until we have a confirmed director, but we expect to give a nomination to the Senate relatively soon, and we are, of course, not waiting. We're starting to build the institutional capacity and the people, and we've seen extraordinary amount of academic interest and support for this project. And so I'm really quite confident we're going to be able to take advantage of a lot of the best talent in the country to build this.
Well, we need the nomination so then we can go on with the confirmation process. And just in abundance of caution is that, and I think Senator Shelby is exactly right about the need for this type of very thoughtful approach, and I would just regret immensely if that nomination wasn't moved with deliberate speed and we got this office up and running fully. And so the burden is on you initially, and then it becomes on us. And if we are really sincere about the need to get good knowledge and good information, and then we'll do it quickly and we'll get it done. Let me change directions just a bit, and again, it's another sort of comment that Senator Shelby made, that one of the most challenging aspects today is trying to regulate the derivatives marketplace. The clearinghouse he talked about, definitions of swaps, exemptions, particularly when you get in the era of synthetic derivatives. I mean, I'm still trying to get my hands around good old-fashioned derivatives, and there's a whole another world of synthetic and ex-prime synthetic derivatives. If we cannot effectively sort of deploy these regulations in a timely way, it seems to me the only stopgap for the uncertainty is increased capital levels in those firms that deal extensively with derivatives. Is that the FSOC view, too? Because you certainly, through your agencies, have the ability to do that.
That's right, but you know, we are very confident that we are going to be able to put in place a regime, for example, that mandates margin requirements in derivatives, and that combined with these stronger capital buffers and the move to central clearing with stronger safeguards in the clearinghouses, that mix of factors will leave us with a much more stable system than we had. Not immune to any crisis, not immune to any shock, but much more stable than we had. And you know, we're trying to get that balance right. And we are, this is a terribly complicated task, and we are slower than we'd hoped to be. But we're slower because we're trying to err on the side of getting it right. and not to rush it. And we want to make sure that we not just get the substance right, but we have the SEC, the CFTC, and the Fed aligned, so we have a better chance of getting London, Frankfurt, Paris, Zurich, Singapore, Hong Kong aligned too. Because we can't put ourselves in a situation where this stuff just moves to markets where it's more risk. So we're a little slower than we hoped. It's because we're trying to make sure that we land it sensibly and on a more level playing field.
Well, I concur. I think you have to be careful and deliberate. This isn't very, very complicated. But I think if you reach a point where you cannot pull together all of these very difficult aspects, in an abundance of caution, I think the only remedy is capital.
Use capital. And that's the way the system works. If you have margin and collateral, you don't have to hold as much capital against it. So it works that way. We have that basic safeguard built in.
One of the issues you raised in your testimony is your concern about the reliance on short-term funding by major financial institutions. And with the tri-party repos market, money market funds, et cetera, particularly in the wake of the European crisis, which many of their institutions depend, as you point out, more so on short-term money than we did. We learned a very painful lesson in 2008 and 2009. What is FSOC doing in terms of trying to deal with this issue? And this might be in the category, some of my colleagues suggested, what is the biggest new threat approaching us?
Well, very important issue. The Fed and the principal supervisors have been very effective in getting banks to fund themselves much more conservatively. So the reliance on short-term funding in the United States has fallen very dramatically. And in the repo markets and the money market funds, there's been substantial shift towards a more conservative regime in that context. And what the FSOC has done is to ask the competent agencies to lay out a comprehensive plan for improving the basic resiliency of those markets. And we get regular updates on progress against that plan. And because these things matter to the system as a whole, we're trying to make sure that, and the Fed and the SEC are doing a great job. They're the ones in charge of this. They're being very careful and good about making sure they're sharing their judgments with us in advance. And so we try to make sure we're looking at the overall interest of the system, not just the interest of those particular parts of the system.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm in a rare circumstance where I am ready to yield, but my colleagues are all voting, so I don't need much more of an invitation to keep asking questions, so bear with me. The housing market is inextricably and inevitably linked to our progress as a nation economically and growth. It is underperforming. Frankly, my impression was that there was a sense a year or so ago that we were turning the corner, but I think there's another corner. And until, from my view, until we stabilize housing prices, begin to deal with the foreclosure issues, we're not going to have the foundation. I mean, that's certainly the perception on Main Street. When you see your neighbor's house, the grass has been cut in 2 months, and you know they've been foreclosed, that's a daily reminder that things are terrible. And then, so, FSOC, this is a systemic issue. You've got to provide the leadership, and I can ask you, what are you doing? And both in terms of the programs that are in place now, but the next steps, because we haven't done enough.
Senator, I agree with you that things are still terrible, and this is going to take it's going to take years still. And what you see now is two things. You see the broader weakness in the economy, unemployment above 9%, income growth slower. That's putting additional pressure on the housing market as a whole, hurting housing demand, slowing the pace, making more people vulnerable, losing their homes. But even apart from that, we still have this a foreclosure process essentially broken, a servicing framework that is not doing a good enough job of helping people stay in their home or transition to other forms of housing. And we are doing as much as we can with the authority we have to help people caught up in this crisis still. And you're right to say it's still terrible. I think the most important things we can do now, apart from trying to do anything we can to make the economy stronger, is to help more people refinance, even people underwater, to help transition more of the empty, vacant properties that exist across the country into rental housing, making financing more available to those, which is we're working on too. But we need to continue to make sure that as many people as we can have a chance to stay in their home if they can afford to. And we need to see banks and servicers and everybody do a much better job, more aggressive job of reaching out to them and trying to make that possible. As you know, I can't comment on the details of this, but there's a very complicated effort to try to bring to earth a global settlement of the legal problems in the foreclosure process. And if that's done well and sensibly, that could make a big difference too.
Just a comment, Mr. Secretary. Your efforts and your colleagues' efforts have been intensive and extensive, but we don't have years.
But disappointing.
Yes, and we don't have years. And if the tools that you have in the toolbox will help us a bit to get this problem fixed in 2 or 3 years, then we've got to get new tools. We've got to think beyond the traditional, and we've got to do it. I will rest my case there. Since there are no of my colleagues from our Republican side, I'm going to ask Senator Bennett to chair the hearing and the questions, and then to recognize the first Republican that returns.
Senator, can I mention one quick thing on housing? I forgot to mention. This is important. You're right to say if we need more authority, we should ask for it. And one of the pieces of the American Jobs Act is a proposal to provide substantial more resources into neighborhoods most affected by the foreclosure crisis. That's expensive, but we can afford it, and it's a good use of scarce resources.
I concur.
I must have been here longer than I thought, Mr. Secretary. 30 years is what it takes to get into this chair.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm not leaving. It's you and I solve all the world's problems. I apologize because I was voting, and I may have missed some of the discussion, but on the economy, just stepping back from this for a second, the last estimates that I saw were that there's something like $2.3 trillion of cash sitting on balance sheets of companies in the United States. It's not being invested in the economy, not producing jobs in the economy. I wonder if you could give us your thoughts on why that is. It seems to me that until that capital is deployed, we're going to have a very hard time bringing this unemployment rate down and creating jobs.
You're right that corporate balance sheets are very strong. People are sitting on a lot of cash still. But I think the best measure of how corporations feel about the outlook is to look at what they're spending. And in the early stage of this recovery, if you look at what corporations, businesses across the country are doing in terms of spending on capital goods and software, equipment and software, they're spending at a rate roughly triple the rate of growth in the economy as a whole. So even though they have a lot of cash, they are investing in things that will make us stronger in the future. What businesses say is...
Although, just on that point, right, a lot of that investment that you're talking about is investment in IT and other things it's actually making people more productive. The company is more productive. It may not be creating jobs because as they become more productive, they figure out how to do what they're doing with fewer people, and we still have to figure out what we're going to do.
That's true, although, again, just to temper the darkness a bit. I mean, this is a very tough economy still, but if you look at private sector job growth since job growth started to recover, it's faster than the last 2 recoveries. Mm-hmm. So again, if you look at how corporations are behaving, they're obviously cautious because growth is slower, and they're more worried about risk out there. But they are investing, and you see in the private investment numbers and in the export numbers other signs of underlying resilience and strength here, which are important. We want to foster those things.
This vote, the yeas 172, the nays 248, 1 voting present. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 5, printed in the congressional record offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 5, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Keating of Massachusetts.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
The House is finishing up work on a bill that would exempt cement manufacturers from many EPA rules and regulations dealing with cement plant emissions. 2-minute vote here on an amendment by William Keating of Massachusetts, which would strike language from the bill requiring a minimum 5-year compliance period. One more amendment vote after this, and then they will move to motion to recommit and final passage. And more work ahead on a similar bill that deals with industrial boilers and incinerators. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, a vote is underway there right now, as a matter of fact, on a bill dealing with Chinese currency manipulation. A cloture vote on limiting debate is underway, and you can follow that on C-SPAN 2. We're also covering today, and matter of fact, in moments, just a couple of minutes away, President Obama holding a news conference at the White House that gets underway at 11 o'clock Eastern. And we will have that live for you at cspan.org, and we'll show all of it to you later in our schedule as well. And it's possible that the President will say something about the Senate proposal now, Harry Reid's proposal, on raising the tax on those making more than $1 million. The Hill is writing this morning that Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid noted from the Senate floor that he has a meeting at the White House at 5:30 Eastern, 5:30 this afternoon, with 3 senators from his Democratic caucus. They write the meeting comes on the heels of major changes he has proposed for President Obama's hallmark jobs package. Reid's new plan replaces Obama's proposed taxes on oil companies and families earning more than $250,000 and replaces that with a surtax on millionaires. The surtax is designed to pay for the bill's $447 billion in spending over the next 10 years. Again, the news conference coming up at 11. That's live at cspan.org.
On this vote, yeas 162 and the nays are 257. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 3 printed in the congressional record offered by gentlewoman from Maryland, Miss Edwards, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in the congressional record, offered by Ms. Edwards of Maryland.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
And this is the last amendment vote on a bill that would delay EPA regulation of air emissions from cement plants. Donna Edwards of Maryland's amendment would add findings to the bill stating that regulations preempted by the bill would have a positive economic impact of $6.7 billion to $18 billion. Again, this is the last amendment vote. Motion to recommit coming up next, and a final passage after that. And we expect the House will continue debate later on a similar bill that deals with regulations, EPA regulations on industrial boilers and incinerators. Well, President Obama is holding his news conference at this hour. It is at the White House. It is live now at cspan.org. Also online, you can follow a couple of the hearings we're covering on Capitol Hill, including Timothy Geithner. We had showed you a bit of that earlier. He is testifying before two committees today. As mandated by the Dodd-Frank law, he is testifying about the Financial Stability Oversight Council, their annual report, and two chances to see him, both online and then later today, the House Financial Services Committee, and he's before Senate Banking this morning.
The yeas